Apple's watches were always pretty good as connected wearable companions, but for me at least, they were often just a little too slow or finicky to really be able to count on. Well, that's not true anymore. Just about everything in the new Apple Watch Series 4, from these bigger screens to the improved chipset to the polished software, make this Apple Watch a huge step forward from earlier models. I still don't think everyone needs one, but the Apple Watch Series 4 is the strongest argument yet for actually wearing a smartwatch. Let's take a closer look. We can't talk about the Series 4 without talking about the Apple Watch's new design. Apple bumped these bodies up to 40 and 44 millimeters, up from the classic 38 and 42. Now, these watches are obviously going to take up a little more room on your wrist as a result, but I think the change is well worth it for these bigger screens. They stretch almost edge to edge, giving workouts and watch apps just a lot more room to breathe. I've been testing the larger 44 millimeter model, and I love this screen, but even the smaller version is a big improvement. I mean, the screen on this year's small Apple Watch is bigger than the screen on last year's big Apple Watch. As a result, icons are easier to tap, and in general, the Series 4 is just much nicer to read, even at a glance. That's a good thing too, since some of the watch faces you'll find here pack in a lot of information. I mean, just look at this thing. There are 8 complications on this face, but it's still pretty easy to figure out exactly what's going on. If that's a little too much information, there are some gorgeous new watch faces that really don't do much more than tell you the time. And since Apple flattened out the watch's design a bit to accommodate these bigger screens, they actually feel a little more comfortable when you're wearing them for long periods of time. You'll find a few more small changes here, like a louder speaker on the left side and a narrower digital crown that makes the watch haptically click when you're turning it. And overall, this feels like the Apple Watch I've wanted all along. The Series 4 is running new software too. Well, new-ish, I guess. watchOS 5 technically went live earlier this month, but it adds a lot to the overall watch experience. You can now stream podcasts directly to the watch and listen through some Bluetooth headphones, which has been really helpful on the rare occasions I've ditched my phone and gone outside to try and work out. Notifications are now grouped by app too, so you don't need to scroll through so many of them at a time. And you can now raise the watch to your face to give Siri commands, which actually works really well. Tell me a joke.
What time is it when an elephant sits on your Apple Watch? Time to get a new Apple Watch.
The assistant never really had trouble figuring out what I was asking it to do. Even better, you can use Siri to fire up the shortcuts you've created in iOS 12. So if the watch can handle your command, like when I ask it to news me, it will. It's a neat touch that makes Siri feel more capable, but man, it still trips up pretty frequently when I'm dictating messages for it to send. And then there's walkie-talkie, which I've used almost daily since I got the watch. The name basically says it all. Once you've invited some people to chat with, you hold down a big yellow button and start talking. The person on the other end will hear what you're saying in near real time. The Apple Watch has always been about small, simple interactions to help you be a little more productive or connected, and walkie-talkie feels like a perfect fit here. Now, if only you could get walkie-talkie group chats going. Of course, none of these features would work as well as they do without the right amount of horsepower. That's where the Series 4's new S4 system in package comes in. This year, Apple went with a 64-bit dual-core processor, and to my utter surprise, the Series 4 runs more smoothly than just about any smartwatch I've tested this year. In earlier models, you'd occasionally run into lag when jumping into different apps or switching between different parts of the watch's interface. That's almost all gone now. Watch apps launch and resume almost instantaneously, and overall, the watch feels as fast as it needed to be this whole time. Hell, if you wanted to, you could even pretty easily multitask on this thing. I am definitely not suggesting that you spend your whole day responding to messages and triaging emails from your wrist, but you can, and mostly without missing a beat. Even if you did that though, you wouldn't have to worry about battery life too much. Apple says both versions of the Series 4 are rated for about 18 hours of use, but this 44mm model has run for between 24 and 36 hours before needing a recharge. Obviously, that's going to change depending on what you actually use the watch for, but even after full days of pretty consistent tapping and prodding, I could still go to bed knowing that the Series 4 would wake me up the following morning. Considering the way Apple has been talking about the watch, it's pretty clear the company would much rather have you get out there and be active with the thing. Thankfully, the Series 4 is better at that stuff too. I've been taking the watch out for some runs, and these step counts were more or less in lockstep with what I saw from my trusty Fitbit Versa. The GPS still takes a little while to get a lock, especially when you're wandering around Manhattan, but I don't have any complaints there either. The big change to how the watch handles fitness, though, is how it now recognizes when you're moving and asks if you want to track your workout. So far, this has worked pretty well. Earlier this week, I destroyed myself on a rowing machine, and the watch kicked in to track my impending death after about 3 minutes. When walking around New York, though, things took a little longer. I would be out there for about 15 minutes before the watch popped up and asked if I wanted to track my stroll. Exercise recognition has been a thing for smartwatches for a little while now, and I'm glad Apple is finally embracing it. That said, hey, Apple, people lift weights too, you know? Some of the watch's more notable competitors, like Samsung's Galaxy Watch, can recognize and track these more complicated workouts without too much trouble. Don't get me wrong, the Series 4 is great at what it does, but the landscape is changing, and this is one area where Apple could really stand to catch up. Of course, Apple pulls away from the rest of the competition in one specific health-related area: proactive care. It's not enabled by default unless you're over 65, but you can set the Series 4 to detect when you stumble and fall. When that happens to me, I usually don't suffer more than a scraped knee or a bruised ego, but once you start getting on in years, even short falls can be surprisingly dangerous. Thankfully, I haven't been able to accidentally trigger this feature and watch my wearable call 911 for me, and hopefully you and the people you love will never need this. Even so, the feature is there, just waiting to help. As a heart monitor, though, the Series 4's best days are yet to come. You won't be able to use the Series 4 to take electrocardiogram or EKG readings until Apple activates the feature later this year. Same goes for the watch's ability to detect and flag irregular heart rhythms. To be clear, if you're concerned in any way about the way your heart works, you go to a real doctor and you talk to them about it. When these features do go live, though, they just might be able to give you a crucial early warning. In years past, it felt like the Apple Watch was just a tiny, occasionally frustrating intermediary for the iPhone that it was connected to. You could get stuff done, sure, but you were often just as well off whipping your phone out and doing things the old-fashioned way. Not anymore. The Apple Watch Series 4 now feels like a truly trusty companion, and one that's always looking out for your physical well-being, too. It doesn't do everything that I want it to, and always on screen and sleep tracking would have been really nice here. And there are also some things we're going to have to revisit in the future, like the watch's EKG feature. That said, this year's version of the Apple Watch is so polished and so competent that there's no question that this is the smartwatch to beat.